In 1974, a young couple decided to go on a walk in the woods at midnight. They were talking and enjoying their night until they heard something in the bushes. They looked in the direction where the noise came from, but it was too dark to see what was lurking in the shadows. The couple tried to brush it off and decided to just continue their journey, but were stopped once again when the man stepped on something soft. Immediately afraid, they both ran out of the woods. 10 years after this incident, the now married couple were watching TV. It was an interview from the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy, when suddenly they made a terrifying discovery. It appeared that when the couple went for a walk that night, the man stepped on one of the many victims of Ted Bundy. He also said that he was less than 1 meter away from the couple, and if they didn't run, he needed to kill them both.
John Wayne Gacy lived a seemingly ordinary life until the discoveries made inside of his house shocked the entire country. I'm partnering with Peacock to cover Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy, a scripted series based on this case, which doesn't just cover the crimes, it covers who he was, and more importantly, who they were, the victims. For too long, their names were shadowed by his. Spotlighting the victims is a huge focal point of the series. It highlights how this case impacted everyone involved, from the families to the attorneys to the investigators that made those chilling discoveries. The storytelling is so well done, it's emotional and it's respectful. It's not just about the crimes. It's about the lives that were taken too soon and the effort from everyone in the community that refused to let their names be forgotten. They're the ones that should be remembered. They're the ones whose stories deserve to be told. And I hope that more and more crime dramas continue to follow this model and put victims in the spotlight. Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy is out now. Check it out for yourself. Stream it now on Peacock.
They were hugging their daughter's killer and they had no idea. It was August 2011 in Fairfield, Ohio. Sacred Heart Festival was on in the area, so everybody was having a great time. It was like food, games, rides, the perfect summer vibe. But that evening, a panicked call came in to police. It was a man called John Carter, and he was basically reporting his fiancée missing. This was Caitlin Markham. Now, Caitlin was an amazing girl. She was 22, and she was a really happy-go-lucky, good time girl. She always had a smile on her face, and she was able to make friends with anyone she met. But her fiancé on the phone to the officers was like, I'm really nervous. I haven't seen her or heard from her since midnight last night. And time ticked on and on and on, and there was just no news from her at all. Everyone was devastated and nobody could make sense of how she just suddenly disappeared without a trace. But after a vigil for the missing woman, there was a breakthrough. A man called Gurpreet Kang was a known S-offender and he lived just across the road. And some people were like, yep, it makes sense. S-offender, girl gone missing, he's hiding something. But in a cruel twist, investigators actually looked into him and figured out he wasn't to blame at all. There was actually no evidence linking him to a crime whatsoever. And the weeks and months and then years went by with no news from Caitlin and no closure for the family. Then there was a devastating breakthrough. A man was walking in the local woods and just happened to come across a plastic bag. And inside was a skull. It wasn't long before experts identified this as Caitlin. Because of the amount of time that had passed, they actually frustratingly couldn't work out how she'd even been killed. All they knew was disturbingly, she'd been kept somewhere and then moved to this second location, which meant somebody had been sneaking around and hiding remains. And strangely, the place where this skull was found was exactly the route that John used to take from his mum's house to his dad's house. Locals started getting very suspicious of John, even more so when they realized he was friends with a convicted killer. He'd been on a guy's night out with a guy called Michael Strauss, who had murdered a girl called Ellie Week. Now, let me know if you want me to do Ellie's case. Yes, being friends with a murderer doesn't make you a murderer yourself, but it doesn't look good, does it? And just wait until you hear the scribbles that were found at John's mum's house where he'd been staying. Police found notes such as, "Deep down, I love her. You want to kill her, but I love her. She must die." Then a note saying, "Oh no, what have I done? What do I do? I know, I'll bury her body in the backyard." And it all started to come out when John was arrested. Turns out the relationship had gone sour when Caitlin realized that John was watching loads and loads of porn, and he was also using substances, and she really disagreed with this. And phone data interestingly showed that just after midnight when Caitlin vanished, both hers and John's phones went inactive at exactly the same time. John's was then turned off for 15 hours and Caitlin's never came back online, and nobody knows where it is to this day. Eventually, the evidence was stacking up and John pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, but he refused to give any details of what actually had happened, and this will infuriate you. He only got 3 years in prison. This man had pretended to cry at her vigil. He'd hugged her parents, meanwhile knowing full well that he'd murdered her.
You know how sometimes you'll watch a scary movie or documentary that's so unsettling that you lose sleep over it? Well, I just watched this documentary called Cropsey. It's about a suspected serial killer named Andre Rand and his ties to Willowbrook State School, which was an asylum in New York for children with intellectual disabilities. And let me just say, I literally didn't sleep at all after watching this. Between 1972 and 1987, 5 young children disappeared from Staten Island, and Andre was last seen near almost every single one of them. What he did was horrible, but it also ties back into Willowbrook State School, which I think everyone should know what happened there. So what you're about to see is the horrific footage that was taken from the inside of Willowbrook State School. This is by far one of the most unsettling videos I have ever seen, so this is your trigger warning.
North of the city, on the way to Bear Mountain, is a lovely-looking place called the Letchworth Village Rehabilitation Center. Set among the hills and woods of suburban Rockland County, a passerby could easily mistake the place for a country club or a college campus. But the early morning mist gave the place an eerie feeling like a set from a horror movie, and once inside, that feeling became suddenly appropriate. The doctor had warned me that it would be bad. It was horrible.
This is Willowbrook State School. The name makes it sound like a lovely place, but really it was described as hell on earth. Willowbrook was a state-supported institution for children with mental disabilities on Staten Island. It operated from 1947 to 1987, and it sat on 375 acres. It was originally designed to hold only 4,000 children, but it eventually held up to 6,000, and most of the children here were abandoned by their families. No one really knew what was going on at the school until 1972, when an investigative journalist named Geraldo Rivera received a phone call from a doctor at the school. The doctor told Geraldo of the horrific conditions there, and he wanted the public to know what was truly happening to these kids. So Geraldo visited the school, and what he found was horrifying. Just upon walking into the school, Geraldo said that the smell was so atrocious that he can remember it even to this day. It was clear that the kids were being severely neglected and abused. They were living in filth and dirt, their clothes were all torn and ragged, and most of them were covered in their own feces. Their rooms were compared to animal cages at the zoo, but worse. Geraldo created an expose that was aired on TV, and it uncovered physical and sexual abuse against the children by members of the school staff. Not only that, but the doctors at Willowbrook were essentially just conducting wildly unethical medical experiments on these children. Outbreaks of hepatitis at the school were really common, which led to years of terrifying studies and experiments on the kids to figure out why 90% of them contracted the virus within 6 months of entering the school. One of the studies was feeding the live hepatitis virus from infected stool samples to 60 healthy children. The doctors would then sit back and watch as their eyes and skin turned yellow, and as their livers got bigger. The kids became extremely sick, but the doctors justified their actions by saying that they were probably going to get the virus anyway. They felt that they weren't causing any harm because they were just kids with mental disabilities. Geraldo's expose shed light into how kids and people in general with mental disabilities are treated. The film is called Willowbrook, the last great disgrace, and it's one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. The sights alone are horrible, but the noises captured on camera, it's just something I won't ever forget. This expose may have shed light on the horrible conditions there, but it did spark major change. School was officially shut down in 1987 after public outrage, and parts of the building were eventually used for the College of Staten Island. After it was shut down, several former Willowbrook kids were sent off to other group homes in the area and finally experienced private rooms, education, and therapy for the first time in their lives. Some were moved to other larger institutions, since not all of them were ready or able to transition to community living. Unfortunately, this meant that some simply ended up in smaller versions of the same system, still neglected, just hidden from public view. Because of poor record keeping, limited oversight, and lack of family contact, some of the kids were lost in the system entirely. Their files gathered dust, and their stories ended in silence. Advocates have said that dozens of Willowbrook kids died within a few years of being relocated due to stress, poor care, or health complications, which is so heartbreaking to think about. What's also so crazy is the fact that Andre Rand, who is a suspected serial killer and connected to a series of child kidnappings, previously worked at Willowbrook as a janitor. One of his suspected victims, 12-year-old Jennifer Schwieger, was found buried in a shallow grave behind Willowbrook. At that point, the school had already been abandoned. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I just watched a crime/horror documentary that was released in 2009 that was about Andre and his awful connection to Willowbrook. The documentary is called Cropsey, and it's honestly super disturbing and unsettling. An urban legend involving one creepy man who turned out to be Andre. As kids, they called this scary unknown man Cropsey. Cropsey was a monster that local parents warned their children about. He was a shadowy figure said to live in the woods of Staten Island, waiting, watching, and taking the kids that wandered too far from home. For years, people thought Cropsey was just a story, a ghost born from fear. But in the 1970s, that story began to feel too real. Children started vanishing, and all of the trails led back to one man, Andre Rand. Before he became the boogeyman of Staten Island, like I mentioned, Andre was a janitor at Willowbrook State School, the institution that was supposed to care for disabled children, but instead looked more like a human warehouse. When Willowbrook was finally shut down in 1987, its tunnels and ruins became a graveyard of echoes, and Andre stayed behind. He camped in the abandoned buildings and the woods surrounding them, a ghost among the decay. Between 1972 and 1987, 5 young children disappeared from the island. Witnesses saw Andre near almost every single one of them. The legend of Cropsey, the faceless killer in the dark, was no longer a bedtime or scary campfire story. It was real, and he had a name. Andre Rand. I wanted to mention Andre because he had this disturbing tie to Willowbrook State School. He was just an added horrible aspect to this school that was already doing unthinkable things to these children. And this documentary highlights the fact that sometimes the boogeyman can turn out to be real, and in this case, he was taking advantage of his connection to a school that was supposed to be helping vulnerable children. But it's now been 38 years since the doors to Willowbrook closed. Yet the horrible things that took place there and the damage left behind in Andre's wake lingers on.
The only thing she was doing was walking home. He just happened to be walking right behind her. 19-year-old Audrey Griffin was born and raised in Australia, and from a very young age, Audrey excelled in sports. She was so athletic, she loved to do all different kinds of things like water polo, rugby, surf, triathlons, you name it, she did it, and she was good at it. Audrey also had plans to enlist in the Navy, and she did so when she was on her second year at university. Those who knew her described her to be warm, happy, friendly, always with a smile on her face, a radiant soul full of light, kindness, and laughter. She was such a loved girl, and she had such a bright future ahead of her, and it physically pains me to say that she never got to live out her dreams. On March 21st of 2025, Audrey was at a place called Arena in New South Wales in Australia. She was there to visit family and friends and her loved ones before she went off to go to the Navy. Her first day there was spent with family, visiting her grandfather. She had plans to stay the night at her father's house because he lived there as well. And the following day, on the 22nd, she had plans to go out with her friends. They were kind of treating it as a little goodbye party for her, knowing that they wouldn't see her for a while when she did go off to the Navy. But nobody could have predicted that Audrey Griffin would not wake up to see another day. Audrey was out with her friends having fun until around 2 in the morning when she was ready to call it a night. She said goodbye to all her friends, hugged them, told them that she loved them, telling them that she was going to be either calling an Uber or using a different rideshare app to call a ride back to her father's house. But Audrey never made it home. According to police documents, we know that she was last seen around 2 in the morning. Her last known location on her phone was near Pump Bridge. On her walk home, she sent 2 Snapchats to one of her friends who started to get concerned about her when she was not responding to any of her text messages the morning after. Audrey's mom now believes that Audrey had started to walk along the water because she was having trouble finding a ride. The morning after, March 21st of 2025, Audrey's mom, Kathleen, woke up and the first thing that she did was check Audrey's location. Her mom was back in Sydney, but she knew that Audrey had gone out with her friends the night before and she just wanted to confirm that she had made it home. But her stomach sank when she saw that Audrey's location was not back at her father's house. In fact, it was at a river. So she called Audrey's dad, who confirmed that she had not made it home, but said that she had been considering sleeping over at a friend's house. So her parents called that friend, but she hadn't seen her either. As soon as her friends realized that Audrey was missing, they went straight to the area in which her phone's last location was pinging near the water. Audrey's father, as well as officers, met them there as well. The first things that were found were Audrey's purse and a hair clip left on the ground, and it did not take long for them to notice something in the water. It was Audrey's body, face down in the Arena Creek. She was gone. Authorities were way too quick to rule her passing as an accident, saying that she ended up there as a result of misadventure, suggesting that she accidentally fell into the creek and couldn't get back up. But her parents knew from day one that that was not the case. Her mom, Kathleen, has said, quote, "She was a swimmer. She's an ocean swimmer. She was strong. My gut was telling me one thing, and it was not to give up," end quote. And it was because of her parents and her loved ones fighting for justice that they would figure out what really happened to her and who was responsible. Her family and friends went back to the area in which her body was found in for the next 3 days in a row, looking for anything that might help them figure out what really happened. Which is when they found Audrey's phone near a tree, starting to paint the idea that she did not just fall into the water as an accident. And eventually authorities admitted that the initial autopsy results did not sit right with them either, claiming that although the results did not initially suggest suspicious circumstances, something still was not adding up. But that part is confusing to me as to why this was ever ruled an accident, considering that DNA that was not hers was found underneath her fingernails, meaning that there was some kind of struggle and that Audrey clearly put up a fight, literally fighting for her life until her very last moments. Her jacket was also found that had marks of dirt on it, again suggesting that there was a struggle, which I guess those findings were not found out until they looked at her body for a second time, but it makes no sense as to why they would not have found that in the first autopsy. Over the following weeks after discovering her body, police received several leads, but I think Audrey's parents and her friends deserve all the credit because they really were taking matters into their own hands, given that they were not happy about the way that the investigation was being treated. Her mother was going up and down the street, door knocking, stopping at different businesses, asking if they had CCTV footage that pointed towards the water where Audrey's body was found, seeing if they caught anything suspicious, and she was so disappointed when store after store after store told her that authorities never even stopped by, never asked any questions, never asked to see any CCTV footage, never questioned anyone whatsoever, really. And then on April 18th, authorities made an announcement that they were looking for a man that had been seen on CCTV footage in the area in which Audrey would have been walking the same night that she disappeared. Did not say that he was a suspect or a person of interest, only that they were looking to talk to him to see if he knew anything. And then a few days later, on April 21st, almost a month after Audrey's body was found, authorities arrested 53-year-old Adrienne Torrance in connection to Audrey's case. It turns out that after taking a closer look at everything, finally, I don't know what took them so long, but after they did so, on CCTV footage, they had seen a man walking very, very closely behind Audrey. After speaking to witnesses, they also learned that a man had heard what he described to be a distressing scream around 3 a.m. coming from the area near that same creek. And a different witness had seen a strange man behaving very suspiciously, whose description sounded a lot like the man that was seen on CCTV footage. One of Kathleen's friends had also reported that 5 days after finding Audrey's body, she had seen a man suspiciously walking around the crime scene and described him again to look exactly like the man who was caught on CCTV footage, even wearing the exact same outfit. Yet it still took weeks for authorities to connect the dots, but that's when they decided to take a closer look at Audrey's body, which is when they found the male DNA underneath her fingernails, and when they tested it against their database, they got an exact match for 53-year-old Adrienne Torrance, making it abundantly clear that her passing was not as a result of an accident, and once again confirming that she had put up a fight. The story that was now forming to sound likely was that Adrienne had snuck up and approached Audrey on her walk, gotten into a physical altercation with her, overpowering her, ending her life, and then leaving her body in the water. When all this information came out, again, this was not too long ago, this was this year, it was all over the media and the story was getting bigger day by day. People were in disbelief that a man would do something so evil. Yet, after his name was released, there was one person who was not surprised to see his face on the news. news, Adrian's ex-wife, Michelle. Adrian and Michelle got married in 2022, and in the beginning stages of their relationship, Adrian had been kind, caring, normal, but before long, Michelle saw his true colors and she quickly realized the kind of person that Adrian was, which was someone with a lot of anger, very little patience, and very, very violent tendencies. He had a lengthy history of aggression against women, and in 2019, he had actually been imprisoned for 20 months, but he was released after only 4. Then he met Michelle, they got married, but throughout their entire marriage, Michelle witnessed firsthand just how quickly Adrian would lose his temper and how quick he was to act on things that made him angry. She experienced him throwing things around, yelling at her, breaking things around her, so much so that she grew to fear him, deeply terrified of what he could be capable of doing. And in 2024, after filing for divorce, Michelle also made sure to get a restraining order against him. Adrian didn't care. He broke the order and continued to contact Michelle over and over again, saying that he was going to show up to her house one day to end her. Out of fear, Michelle went back to the police station, and it was only then that she found out that he, 1, had a criminal history, and 2, just how lengthy it was. He had so much on his record, but one thing was constant: aggression against women. And looking at his background signaled that he was the exact kind of person who would do something like what happened to Audrey Griffin. After Michelle made the decision to end their marriage, after it was ruled that Adrian was supposed to stay away from her, not contact her, he continued leaving her voicemail after voicemail, letting her know that one day he was going to go after her. And every single time Michelle would take this to the police station, but for some reason 5 months passed of authorities allegedly looking for Adrian but not being able to find him. Michelle would call regularly asking if they had found him yet, and they would just say, no, still looking. This went on for 5 months, with no progress the entire time. Michelle sitting in her house terrified, not knowing if he was looking into her windows planning to do something terrible. When Michelle went to the police station in January of 2025 to report that Adrian was still refusing to leave her alone and saying that she was terrified of him and constantly looking over her shoulder, he was taken to court. But instead of receiving jail time, he was released and was supposed to be carefully watched and monitored, yet he wasn't. And only 4 months after that, he would take Audrey's life. Soon after his arrest in connection to Audrey, Michelle cooperated with authorities, telling them all about the kind of person that Adrian was, saying that she always had a gut feeling that he was going to hurt someone very badly. She also told them that the night of Audrey's passing, Adrian had called her over and over again, leaving her voicemails telling her that he was going to unalive her. And she said that by that point, she had lost all faith in authorities because she had called about him so many times before, yet nothing was ever done, which is why she did not call them that night. In March of 2025, obviously, I'm not putting any blame on Michelle whatsoever. She was 1,000,000% a victim of Adrian's as well. But my point being that Adrian should have never been allowed to be free just out and about walking the streets based on his past behavior. And when Audrey's parents found out about who Adrian Torrance was and about his past and about how many times he was failed to be put behind bars, I mean, you can imagine how they felt. They could not fathom how a person like that was allowed to just be roaming free. If he had been given jail time like he should have been, Audrey Griffin would still be alive. And her parents were not only sad about their daughter, obviously they were heartbroken, dealing with the biggest loss they had ever dealt with, but they understood that if it wasn't her, it was going to be someone else. Adrian was going to do this to someone someday. Every single warning sign was there, and every single warning sign was ignored. And it makes me sick to my stomach knowing that if Audrey's parents would not have pushed as hard as they did, if they just accepted the ruling that this was an accident, I have no doubt that Adrian would have done this again to somebody else. Maybe to Michelle, or maybe to any other female that he just caught at the wrong place at the wrong time. And as if everything I told you wasn't already enough to prove Adrian's guilt, we later find out that weeks after Audrey's body was found, but before his arrest, he had called a friend to confess, saying, quote, "I just effing clicked and I have no reason for my actions. I just did it, man. I was so effed up, you know. I killed someone about a month ago and now they're looking for me," end quote. Adrian was in custody for 3 days before he unalived himself in his cell. What a coward is all I have to say about that. Audrey's parents have not and will not give up on trying to do everything that they can to make sure that something changes so things like this stop happening. And her mother has said that she's never going to give up on her daughter, but that right now she isn't living. She's just focusing on trying to survive. After her passing, the community really showed up for her family to offer their support. Over 1,000 people gathered together at Terrigal Beach to honor Audrey and to show their support for the family. One of Audrey's favorite times of the day was sunset. The sun is setting right now. It's making me so sad. And when they all gathered together, Kathleen asked for everyone to watch together as the sun went down to honor her daughter. Audrey was a student. She was an athlete. She was a friend. She was a daughter. And she really had her whole life ahead of her. And I hope that her story makes a difference. That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening to this. Thank you so much for spending time with me and for listening to Audrey's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
They were hugging their daughter's killer and they had no idea. It was August 2011 in Fairfield, Ohio. The Sacred Heart Festival was on in the area, so everybody was having a great time. It was like food, games, rides, the perfect like summer vibe. But that evening, a panicked call came in to police. It was a man called John Carter, and he was basically reporting his fiancée missing. This was Caitlin Markham. Now, Caitlin was an amazing girl. She was 22, and she was a really like happy-go-lucky, good time girl. She always had a smile on her face, and she was able to make friends with anyone she met. But her fiancé on the phone to the officers was like, I'm really nervous. I haven't seen her or heard from her since midnight last night. And time ticked on and on and on, and there was just no news from her at all. Everyone was devastated, and nobody could make sense of how she just suddenly disappeared without a trace. But after a vigil for the missing woman, there was a breakthrough. A man called Gurpreet Kang was a known S-offender, and he lived just across the road. And some people were like, yep, it makes sense. S-offender, girl gone missing, like he's hiding something. But in a cruel twist, investigators actually looked into him and figured out he wasn't to blame at all. There was actually no evidence linking him to a crime whatsoever. And the weeks and months and then years went by with no news from Caitlin and no closure for the family. Then there was a devastating breakthrough. A man was walking in the local woods and just happened to come across a plastic bag. And inside was a skull. It wasn't long before experts identified this as Caitlin. Because of the amount of time that had passed, they actually frustratingly couldn't work out how she'd even been killed. All they knew was disturbingly, she'd been kept somewhere and then moved to this second location, which meant somebody had been sneaking around and hiding remains. And strangely, the place where this skull was found was exactly the route that John used to take from his mum's house to his dad's house. Locals started getting very suspicious of John, even more so when they realized he was friends with a convicted killer. He'd been on like a guy's night out with a guy called Michael Strauss, who had murdered a girl called Ellie Week. Now let me know if you want me to do Ellie's case. Yes, being friends with a murderer doesn't make you a murderer yourself, but it doesn't look good, does it? And just wait until you hear the scribbles that were found at John's mum's house where he'd been staying. Police found notes such as, "Deep down, I love her. You want to kill her, but I love her. She must die." Then a note saying, "Oh no, what have I done? What do I do? I know, I'll bury her body in the backyard." And it all started to come out when John was arrested. Turns out the relationship had gone sour when Caitlin realized that John was watching loads and loads of porn, and he was also using substances, and she really disagreed with this. And phone data interestingly showed that just after midnight when Caitlin vanished, both hers and John's phones went inactive at exactly the same time. John's was then turned off for 15 hours, and Caitlin's never came back online, and nobody knows where it is to this day. Eventually, the evidence was stacking up, and John pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, but he refused to give any details of what actually had happened, and this will infuriate you. He only got 3 years in prison. This man had pretended to cry at her vigil. He'd hugged her parents, meanwhile knowing full well that he'd murdered her.
I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding why, if you were struggling to get pregnant, your first thought would be, oh, I should lie to everyone, tell everyone in my life that I'm pregnant, and then go steal a baby out of a pregnant woman's womb. Because how on earth does that thought even cross your mind? 42-year-old Amber Waterman and her husband, 42-year-old Jamie Waterman, lived in Pineville, Missouri in 2022, and in September of 2022, they had something big to celebrate because the couple found out that they were expecting. This was huge for them. Amber finding out that she was going to get to be a mother was the best thing in her entire life, but it was even more exciting because the couple had struggled to get pregnant in the first place. They were starting to doubt if they would be able to have their own baby at all, and they didn't know if they were going to be able to create the family that they had always wanted, so finding out that they were pregnant felt like a true miracle. And Amber went on social media to announce her pregnancy, posting the ultrasound pictures, consistently posting about appointments and updates and questions and concerns. She talked about the due date, the mood swings, the excitement, the nerves. She was sharing everything, very active on social media. And yet another person who was also very active on social media was a woman called Lucy Barrows. Lucy Barrows loved to post on a specific Facebook group, a group that was meant for buying and selling secondhand baby items, and she was at her peak of posting in October of 2022. Pregnant women who were expecting would go onto that Facebook group and post about needing or looking for specific baby items, and very quickly, it became a pattern that anytime anyone asked for anything such as a stroller or clothes or baby monitors or car seats, Lucy Barrows would be the first one to raise her hand and say, I have what you're looking for, when can we meet up? Lucy would also message people from the group privately saying that she had a ton of baby stuff that she was looking to get rid of, and saying that she would give them whatever they needed or wanted for free. All they had to do was meet up with her, and one of the women in the group was 33-year-old Ashley Bush. Ashley Bush and her fiance Joshua Willis had 3 children together, 2 that were from Ashley's previous marriage, 1 that they had together, but all 3 kids lived with them, and they were very excited about their 4th that was on the way. Their kids were 2, 7, and 8 years old, and Ashley was 31 weeks pregnant with a baby girl who they had already named Valkyrie Grace Willis. Ashley and Joshua were the epitome of puppy love. It sounds like Ashley was just a ray of sunshine who adored her husband and adored her children, and their little family was the most important thing in the world to them. Ashley was kind and sweet and gentle, and Joshua was the perfect family for her, the perfect dad, but also stepdad. In October of 2022, the family was living in Arkansas. They were getting everything prepped to welcome their new baby girl into the world, and even though they were really excited, Joshua and Ashley were a little bit stressed financially, understanding that their family of 5 was about to be a family of 6, meaning their expenses would go up. And it was also a stressful time because Ashley was very obviously pregnant, due to give birth at any point in time, meaning that she would have to take time off work to do that. She was also dealing with complications in her pregnancy, and her doctor advised her to stay out of work due to those complications. But Joshua was also dealing with his own health issues. He had multiple surgeries, so he had to take time off work as well. So they were worried financially about how they were going to be able to make things work. And in an attempt to save money where they could, Ashley joined Facebook groups in the area where other parents would sell and buy baby stuff. That's how Lucy Barrows found her, and that's why she messaged her. Lucy messaged Ashley saying, hey, I see you're looking for X, Y, and Z. I have those things and I would be more than happy to give them to you for free. But what really caught her eye about the message was that Lucy also said, hey, by the way, I also know about a job opening for a work from home job, and I actually think that you would be the perfect fit for the job. So to Ashley, Lucy was like an answered prayer. She was stressed about getting things together for the baby. She was stressed about her job, and in comes Lucy Barrows, who seems to have a solution for both of those problems. She could help her out by giving her baby items, and if Ashley was able to secure the job, she would be able to work from the comfort of her own home, which would make things so much easier for her, taking care of not only 3 kids but also a newborn. So Ashley agrees to meet up with Lucy on October 28th of 2022 at a public library in Gravette, Arkansas. But right before, Lucy tells Ashley that she needs to make sure that she comes alone, because according to Lucy, she had been robbed in the past and she was very wary, so she would rather it just be the 2 of them, and she tells Ashley to please not bring anyone but herself. Ashley says okay, sure, but she does have her fiance Joshua drop her off, and Joshua does stay in the parking lot while Lucy and Ashley meet up inside just to be safe, which good on him, glad he did that. By the way, don't meet up with strangers. I know I have a lot of younger girls watching my videos. Do not meet up with strangers, okay? Always take someone with you if you don't know the person that you are arranging to meet. Anyway, the meeting goes great, except for now I think is a good time to tell you that Lucy Barrows does not exist. Lucy Barrows was a fake Facebook page created by Amber Waterman in October of 2022, and Amber Waterman was never pregnant. She lied to everyone in her life about being pregnant. She was never pregnant. Everything was fake. She apparently, I guess, also lied to her husband, Jamie Waterman. He was also apparently under the impression that Amber really was pregnant, but we're going to circle back around to him later on. Point being, Amber Waterman was stalking Facebook groups to find pregnant women because she wanted to steal someone's baby, and she decided that Ashley Bush would be her perfect victim. So they meet up for the first time. Ashley and her fiance Joshua are still under the impression that Amber Waterman was this fake person, Lucy Barrows, and Ashley is feeling super hopeful after their first meeting. And at the end of the meeting, Amber hands Ashley over paperwork and tells her to be on the lookout from an email from this supposed fake boss for the second interview. And she explains to her that the last steps for Ashley to secure this job would be to travel with her, to travel with Amber to Bentonville, Arkansas for the final interview with this boss, apparently. So their little day trip to travel together to this final interview gets scheduled for October 31st on Halloween. The plan was that Joshua, Ashley's fiance, was going to drop off Ashley at a convenience store that was about 20-ish minutes away from their house. Lucy would be there waiting for her. Ashley would get in Lucy's truck and they would head off. Then they would meet back up in the afternoon for Joshua to pick up Ashley from that same convenience store, and then they would go home. I assume that convenience store was about halfway closer to their final destination, which is why they picked that as the meetup point to make the drive easier. So on October 31st, Joshua drove Ashley, his 33-week pregnant fiance, to that convenience store in Maysville. Joshua watched Ashley as she got out of his car and walked over to what they thought was Lucy Barrows' truck. Joshua saw Lucy, aka Amber, sitting in her truck and recognized her face as the same person person who was at the public library, so he thought that it made sense and that Ashley would be safe. Ashley got in the truck with Amber and Joshua watched as they drove off. That was the last time that Joshua would see his fiance alive ever again. 4 hours later, he showed up again at the same convenience store to pick up Ashley, and that's when he saw Amber, who he still thought was Lucy, in her truck with Ashley also sitting in her truck, but Ashley seemed to be slumped over. When Amber saw Joshua, she made eye contact with him, and then Amber sped off and drove away. Joshua was so confused, and now he was concerned, and he sped off right behind Amber, chasing down her truck. He was chasing her, but he eventually lost her, so Amber now has gotten away with Ashley in her truck. So Joshua rushes back home. He pulls up Lucy Barrows on Facebook, thinking that maybe he would be able to find her home address and he would show up there to see if maybe she drove Ashley back to her house, but he cannot find any information on this Lucy Barrows. And that's when, for the first time, he realizes that Lucy Barrows might be a fake Facebook profile. He cannot find anything on Lucy. He calls the company that Ashley was supposed to be interviewing for, and it's a real company, but they confirm that they don't know anything about anyone being interviewed. They don't know anything about Ashley Bush, and especially they don't know anything about any Lucy Barrows. And Joshua realizes that everything was fake, and now he's sick to his stomach, understanding that his fiancée Ashley was likely in danger. Every single call and text to Ashley was going unanswered, but Joshua was able to track her phone and see her location, so he sped off to the area in which her phone was pinging in. But the only thing he found was Ashley's phone ditched on the side of the road. There was no sign of Ashley or Amber, and that's when he called 911 to officially report his fiancée a missing person. By this point, Amber Waterman had driven all the way back to Missouri to her house with Ashley in her truck, and there she had taken a sharp object and used it on Ashley. Specifically on Ashley's stomach area, with intentions of ripping her baby out of her and stealing it. We have no idea if Ashley was still alive, but all reports hint to the fact that she was, which is so sick. And I cannot imagine the pain and fear that she must have felt when Amber was doing what she did to her. It goes without saying that Amber had absolutely no idea what she was doing. But even if she did, even if she was a surgeon doing what she was doing to Ashley, knowing that Ashley was likely still alive, obviously she's not medicated or anything. So even if Amber did know what she was doing, the pain that Ashley would have been in is unbearable, as her baby was physically yanked away from her. 33-year-old Ashley Bush lost her life in the process, and the last thing that she saw moments before she passed was her baby, who she already loved so much, being ripped out of her. Afterwards, Amber herself called 911, and on the call, lying completely, she told the operator that she had just given birth by herself in her truck on her drive to the hospital, and she said that the baby was not breathing. She got in the truck with Ashley's baby, drove to an empty road to pretend that she had just given birth by herself in her truck, and she gave the operator that location for the ambulance to come and meet her. And while she was waiting for the ambulance, she also called her husband Jamie, who drove to meet her on the side of the road, and she was lying to him still. I guess that he really thought that she was pregnant, and he believed her, I guess, when she said that she had just given birth by herself in her truck. Like, obviously Amber didn't think things through or just flat out didn't care. I don't know how or why she thought that she would be able to ever pull off this fake story that she had just completely made up out of nowhere. By the time paramedics got there, the tiny little innocent tiny little baby was already gone. It was too late. Despite their best efforts, they could not save her. And when they looked at Amber, there were no signs at all that she had just given birth other than the placenta stuffed down her pants. But listen to this, for some reason the placenta that she has stolen and stuffed inside of her pants was enough for authorities to believe her story. Yeah, they believed Amber fully. They saw the placenta in her pants and said, yeah, okay, must be your baby. I'm not even lying. They believed her. I don't know if she was taken to the hospital. I don't know if they just let her go without taking her to seek medical attention. I don't know. But I do know that Amber was not questioned further. And following that tragic day, Amber Waterman began planning a funeral for the baby that she was still claiming was hers, continuing her lies, continuing to fool everyone around her that she had just lost her baby and that she was going to have a funeral for her. Meanwhile, the search for Ashley Bush was still underway. Joshua was in complete distress, not knowing what happened to his fiancée or where she disappeared from, and it did not take authorities long to be informed about this Lucy Barrows Facebook page. And after receiving the IP address from Facebook for that profile, investigators were led to none other than Amber Waterman's home address. So they go to Amber's house. She's there with her husband Jamie, and they're like, hey, what do you know about Lucy Barrows? What do you know about Ashley Bush? Amber says, oh, well, I don't know anything about Ashley Bush. And she says, by the way, now is not really the best time to chat because I just gave birth to my baby in my trunk a few days ago, and now I'm in a really hard place place. I'm in the middle of planning a funeral, so I don't really want to talk right now. But I can tell you that Lucy Barrows was my old coworker. We used to work at Walmart together. Other than that, I don't really know why my home address would be connected to Lucy's Facebook account. And officers say, okay, cool. Sorry to hear about your baby. My condolences. But thanks for letting us know that Lucy Barrows is your old coworker from Walmart. And they leave her house and they go looking for this Lucy Barrows person who does not exist. What do you mean? What do you mean? Jamie, her husband, is obviously there when Amber is being questioned about the situation, and as soon as officers leave their house, Amber Waterman confesses to everything to her husband Jamie, saying, I was never pregnant, I faked the entire thing, I am actually in fact Lucy Barrows, and I used that fake Facebook profile to lure in Ashley Bush. I unalived her, I ripped her baby out of her, faked it as my own, and I've been hiding Ashley's body in the woods behind her house. And you would like to think that Joshua was shocked, disgusted, distraught, devastated, and that he would take this new information that he just got, this confession that he just got, straight to investigators. And he was shocked, but did he do the right thing and go and tell the officers the information that he had just found out? No. Instead, he decided that he was going to help his wife Amber cover this entire thing up. Because why not? So Amber and Jamie walk out of their house into the woods behind their house to Ashley's body, and together they wrap up her body in a tarp, they drag her to their backyard, start a fire, cover Ashley's body in gasoline, and then place her body on top of the fire in their attempt to get rid of her body completely. After the fire goes out, Jamie wraps up Ashley's remains, drives to a different wooded area, and disposes of the remainder remains there. And then on November 2nd, the couple gets ready to host this funeral. You can't make this up. But before the funeral can take place, the coroner's office says that they need to conduct an autopsy on the baby, and Amber has one question for the coroner. She says, hey, when you conduct the autopsy on my baby, do you think that you're going to test the DNA? And the coroner is taken aback. The coroner is the first person to be like, what is going on here? Something weird is happening. Something is not right. And the coroner and the funeral home say, okay, we are going to pause this funeral, delay this funeral until we get the autopsy results back because you two are acting really suspicious. And Amber is playing the victim, saying that she could not believe that she was being looked at suspiciously because she was a grieving mother and she was so sad and she was so depressed, mourning the loss of her baby. But the funeral home brings this to the attention of the investigators, who are well aware that a pregnant woman has been reported missing, and finally they start to connect the dots. And on November 3rd, Amber and Jamie were taken to the police station for questioning while another group of officers was working on getting a proper search warrant for their house. And that's when Jamie confesses everything, and he tells authorities everything that Amber told him about Ashley, about Lucy, about Ashley's baby, and the fact that their baby was not their baby. And he tells them where they disposed of Ashley's body, leaving the investigators' jaws on the floor. Amber Waterman was charged to everything she did, not only to Ashley but also to the baby. She eventually pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences in federal prison without the possibility of parole. And Jamie Waterman was charged with being an accessory after the fact. He has not yet been convicted, but he is facing up to 15 years in prison. He also did plead guilty. As you can imagine, when Ashley's loved ones, when her fiance Joshua was made aware of this entire situation, his entire world came crashing down, understanding that the love of his life was never coming home again, and he would never ever be able to meet their baby. And this is a quote from him, quote, I'm disgusted in the whole situation. I wish that Ashley and Valkyrie were alive and home with us all. I can't believe that there are people out there that would do something like this. She was a great mother, a wonderful wife, a very outgoing, caring, and kind person. They did not deserve any of this. There are 3 amazing kids here that just lost their mother and best friend and little sister. I just love my wife and daughter. We are all going to support each other through this, but we are all devastated in the whole thing. We were all hoping and praying they would come home safely. I've lost all hope in humanity. I appreciate all the help out there from everyone, unquote. What do you even say about a case like this? Like, I also cannot believe that there are people out there who do this. And believe it or not, I think I may have done a video on a similar case to this before. Believe it or not, there are so many cases of women doing this. It's insanity. That is all I have for today's story. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. Thank you for listening to Ashley and Valkyrie's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.